Anyone who still knows their bully from school? What are they doing now? Story 1. He randomly reached out to me on Facebook, not to apologize or anything, but to ask a favor. I work in a place with a large tourist presence, and he wanted me to squeeze him into a tour. When I pointed out our difficult past, his response was, "Now that I think about it, I guess I did kind of treat you badly," and stopped there. Story 2. She was my best friend at first. Then, she and another girl started bullying me. We were the only 3 girls in class, so things like changing for gym were horrible. They bullied me at school and outside of school. 100 of text messages telling me how everybody hated me and how ugly I was. They hacked into some social media profile of mine and ridiculed me and so on. She messaged me some years later asking me how I was. I told her, "Sorry, I am not interested in talking to you." She called me very arrogant and stuck up and told me she did nothing wrong. Now that I am an adult, I hope I never have to hear from her/see her ever again. Story 3. She sells handcrafted jewelry and tried to create this entire podcast and TikTok based off inner healing and chakras. She actually talked a lot about how she used to be an insecure bully with extreme body dysmorphia. It takes a lot to admit all of that, so I wish her well. It seems like she's in a way better place. Story 4. I don't know what he's doing now. He wasn't really a bully, but he sure tried to be to try to look cool to the preppy kids. We were pretty evenly matched. We'd meet every day after school next to the buses and fight. A couple years ago, I saw him comment on a mutual friend's post, and I said, "What's up, fucker? Long time no fisticuffs? Wanna fight?" I haven't seen him in 26 years, and we both had a good laugh about my comment. Story 5. He was a bully to me in 8th and 9th grade. We became really close friends our sophomore year of high school after working through a lot of shit. Basically, he was a really insecure kid, and his bullying of me made him feel more secure. I was, and still am, an emotional person, which I got shit on for a lot as a kid and not being manly. He moved to Georgia later that year. We stayed really good friends mostly through video games. But he ended up dropping out of college, getting into substances, and was very depressed. We've stayed in touch into our 30s. He came to my wedding. He's still using substances and is really depressed, but he's acknowledged those issues and is trying to do something about it now. I try to support him when I'm able. Story 6. One of the school bullies bullied me relentlessly in grade 7 and 8. But then we became really good friends starting in grade 9 when we developed friends in common and realized we were into the same stuff. We are still friends 30 years later. He's a very kind person who has devoted his life to helping refugees. Story 7. He went to prison. He bullied me through the whole of primary school, even putting me in the hospital once. I was 7. He was big for his age, heavyset and tall. I was a small girl. If I had a penny for every time an adult would tell me he only does it because he likes you, I'd have a lot of pennies. He didn't like me. He hated me. I don't know why. I never did anything to him. But I was the only person he consistently picked on. I was a very sensitive child as well, so he'd always get a reaction, usually tears, and it escalated and escalated until eventually I ended up in hospital. Anyway, we were separated after that incident and put into separate classes. He lived a few streets away from me, but he'd never come near me outside of school. I heard years later that he was doing a long sentence in prison for armed robbery. I think someone got hurt as a result. He's out now and lives at home with his mother. Dude has aged about 20 years. I'm 36 now. Dude looks mid-50s. I hope he's miserable. Story 8. Saw him at a bar once, in my hometown. Came up and apologized for how he treated me and my brother, saying he was a dumb kid that didn't know better, that he had started a family and was trying to make amends. It was really heartfelt, and I let him know I forgave him. The stupidity of childhood doesn't need to continue to adulthood. I didn't remember him at all. Story 9. She's doing pretty great in many ways. She's got a good job, 2 fantastic kids, is navigating a collaborative relationship with her ex, has a boyfriend she loves, and a sister who adores her even though she was an incredibly cruel and effective bully for our entire adolescence. She's been very regretful and apologetic about it all. I'd prefer to not have had to endure that, but I do love and treasure her. Story 10. Cheated through high school, cheated through college, the type of jock bully to intimidate nerds into doing his work, letting him cheat off them. And that became really obvious when he entered the workforce. Couldn't keep a job that involved his degree, education, because he didn't actually have either, and wound up bartending at the restaurant that he bussed tables at back in high school. Turns out, the asshole jock shtick doesn't work as an adult bartender that lives with their parents, so the supply of hot girls he always bragged about came to an end. He wound up marrying one of his mom's divorced friends. That's twice his age and has teenage kids. He's still an asshole, but he's moved towards the boomer style of asshole where he makes inappropriate comments only he chuckles at. Story 11. He found Jesus and really does live up to it. Big on service to the community, helps organize the food pantry, often in a leadership position for whatever charitable cause they're working toward, lives a pretty frugal, modest life. He even stopped me at work one day just to apologize for the person he used to be. Said he'd understand if I didn't want to forgive him for it, but he still wanted to do something toward making things right. Story 12. Lawyer Daddy Dearest stopped bailing her out of her spoiled princess outbursts as soon as she got into college and cut her off. Pride comes before the fall, and oh boy did she fall hard. Last I heard, 12 years later, she's just like the rest of us regular, higher, lower-class people, one hiccup away from being homeless, and certainly can't afford the luxury makeup or clothing she would flaunt in others' faces. Couldn't happen to a nicer person. Story 13. He was my best friend until high school. He became a total dick and told people in school that I was staring at other guys in the locker room. I was pretty much the smallest guy in my class. Got older, grew taller, gained some muscle, went to a class reunion last year, and he was the only one there that brought his kids along. I talked to everyone but him. People even picked up on the tension. I should be the bigger person, but seriously, fuck that guy. Story 14. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, lost his mail-order bride to cancer, lost his home and everything he owned. He lives with his parents who are in their 80s. He's very overweight, looks like a bum. I see him walking their dog sometimes and I feel a bit bad for him and his family. Then I remember how cruel he was, how he would knock me down and laugh. I was so young I couldn't understand why someone was being this way. Then I think, fuck this guy. He was the first bully, and after him I learned out to stand up for myself and fight. Story 15. High school in the late 90s. I had two, one in the same grade and one 2 grades below me. The one in the same grade as me was more opportunistic, hung out in the same tough crowd as the other bully, and had a rough family life. The year I graduated high school, his grandmother, who was his only caretaker, died. And suddenly he had almost no family, and a shitload of emotional baggage and family abuse to deal with. Last I heard, he spent a few years in juvenile detention, but got his shit together at least enough to become a correctional officer. Big surprise there. The second bully was a legitimate psychopath with massive family trauma. He once held me by my shirt over a second-story balcony and threatened to murder me, and it would just look like an accident. I think he spent some time in prison for murder in the 00s. But it looks like he's a pipe fitter now and has a young kid, so obviously he's out now. The first guy I could have fought back against and he probably would have stopped. The second guy was legitimately mentally fucked and absolutely would have murdered me if given the opportunity. Story 16. My buddy was the bully. High school was like 15 years ago for us, but during that time he messed with a lot of kids, knocked books out of people's hands, ripped their projects in half, did a leg sweep on a kid and broke his chin, etc. Grew up to be an outstanding man. He was actually the best man at my wedding. Some years after high school, we saw some classmates at a local bar and he took it upon himself to apologize to them. His dad passed during COVID, so he works hard to take care of his mom and sister. Kid had quite the character development after high school. Story 17. My bully from junior high did not live to graduate. Some booze and a fast car took care of that. The bully from grade 9 became a welder, then developed health problems and passed away from a heart attack around age 30. Another bully died in a car crash in high school. Another guy threatened but never did hit me. I stood up to him and did not flinch. I think I earned his respect because that is how it worked there. Get bullied or stand up to them. I met this guy in a bar when I went back home one time. We ended up drinking beer together with other friends and it was like nothing ever happened. We are Facebook friends. He works in construction and is maybe a crew foreman now. Story 18. This is a different take and I might get flack for it, but I was this girl's bully in middle school. I used to flip her off on the bus for some reason. There's no excuse, and I really have no idea what made me say mean things to her. Anyway, I felt terrible about it for years, and I finally just sent her a genuinely heartfelt apology after all this time. I was scared it would open old wounds, or I would come across like I was just trying to appease my own guilt, so I really needed to choose my words carefully. I think it took me a long-ass time to grow up, go to therapy, and reflect on all the years I've been an ass to people who didn't deserve it. Surprisingly, she accepted my apology and opened up about how the trauma from it carried into her adult life, and hearing from me helped things a lot. She didn't blame me since we were kids, but I knew better. I regret what I've done to her. Anyway, I fully support apologizing to people you have bullied, as long as it's for the right reasons and if you're prepared to get told to kick rocks. I wish my bullies would apologize, Even this late in life, it would mean a lot, but I doubt that'll ever happen. Story 19. Pretty good, actually. He really matured and turned a new leaf. He's working for an accounting firm, he opened a nice outdoor restaurant, has a house, a nice car, and has a girlfriend. I did confront him not too long after high school and asked why he was so mean to me, and he told me he was young and insecure, and picking on a quiet, friendly classmate made him feel superior. He said he wasn't self-aware of how he was acting. He apologized. We're on the opposite sides of the country, but we do text once in a while to check in on each other. It really gave me closure as well as inner peace knowing that holding grudges is unnecessary and that we're all capable of change. Story 20, I'm not proud of this. I had a guy who bullied me in HS. It wasn't so bad, but it wasn't great. We actually got into a fight over it, but he was 2 years older than me, and it didn't end well for me. Anyway, in college, I started weight training and boxing, was a middling boxer at best. My only advantage was a high strength-to-weight ratio and some rage issues. After college, I got my first job, and maybe 2 years after that, ran into him at a restaurant. Here is the not proud part. I accosted him in the restaurant. He was with his GF, and I'm not sure he recognized or remembered me at first. I damn near put a fork through his eye. A male friend I was there with thankfully was able to restrain me. All 4 of us were ejected from restaurant and I came after him on the curbside. He ran and I never saw him again. After that, I knew I had to get some help with the rage issues. I did, and age mellowed me out. I'm kinda shocked the cops weren't called. This was the 90s though, so not everyone had cell phones at the ready. Story 21. My bully in elementary school became one of my best friends in high school. We went to different middle schools, and the first time I saw him after elementary school was in an AP World History class in high school. We quickly realized that we were in the class because we both were history nerds and weren't the typical type A students who studied our asses off like almost everyone else in that class. He actually got potential bullies to back off and looked out for me. He was a lineman on the football team, and I was a skinny band dork. In retrospect, he was a dick to other people, so I wish I spoke up more. But I didn't want to rock the boat since I wasn't a target, and I eventually become friends with a lot of the athletes since I loved sports and talking about them, but wasn't genetically predisposed to be successful at them. 25 plus years later, he's still one of my best friends, even though we don't live anywhere near each other and have very little in common as far as worldview goes. Story 22. My bully also happened to be my biggest crush for most of my elementary school life, but they moved away during high school and I never saw them again. A few years ago, I randomly decided to check their Facebook profile to see what they were up to now. Massive Donald Trump supporter, QAnon and Pizzagate truther. Was literally at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Proudly had a photo of themselves there as their FB banner photo. Needless to say, despite the insecurity and self-confidence issues it caused me growing up, I think it's safe to say I dodged a bullet. Story 23. I met up with one of mine about 10 years ago. We had grown up a lot and kind of became friends for a short period of time before she left our hometown to join a commune in Oregon. I think she's probably an alright person. Now, although we did not keep in touch except for a few social media messages here and there over the last decade. We had known each other since kindergarten, and both ended up at a very small Jewish private school from 2nd to 8th grade. She had become friends with the ultra-rich girls during our schooling, and the psychological warfare little rich private school girls will put on one another I wouldn't wish upon anyone. Story 24. One of them dropped out of high school. I ended up approving the deed to foreclose on his house later for failure to pay his taxes, about a decade's worth. Oddly enough, the other became an attorney. I've dealt with him since, and he's truly become a great person. Helps the homeless, gives away most of his salary, etc. He even apologized to me and has been a decent person to me for the past decade or so. I don't know what happened to change him, but yeah, I've got no grudge at this point. Story 25. Ooh, this one's weird for me. I didn't have a school bully, but I did have an older boy, 16 at the time, next door, who sexually molested me when I was a little girl. I didn't exactly forget about him over the years, but looked him up randomly about a year ago. Ends up his granddaughter died in a car accident not much younger than I was when he hurt me. It was a really odd feeling learning that. Story 26. We had a girl in high school, definitely. Thought her shit didn't stink. She was so mean to everybody, except for the few that were in her orb. I went to a high school reunion. She was still holding court, with her little toadies. I said hi to her. She said, "Don't talk to me. You are not worth the effort. Mean girls raise mean daughters, and her daughters are just like her." Story 27. Kid from middle school tormented me daily. He wasn't the biggest, but had an entourage to gang up on me, the ringleader, so to speak. When I caught up with him at a party years later in our late 20s, he was a pathetic, friendless, disheveled drunk ass who had the audacity to say something along the lines of, "Hey, I remember you from middle school. Didn't we have fun?" He said it with a sly, sarcastic grin, and my reply was simply, "Well, not as much fun as seeing what you did with yourself since." He got all pissed off, already pissed drunk, of course, left the party, never saw him again. Turns out the drunk bully died from, you guessed it, alcohol poisoning a couple years later. Story 28. There were two brothers, one a year younger than me and one a year older. They picked on me and my little brother. They lived at home with their elderly mother for decades after high school, and now live together in a shitty apartment in the same hometown we grew up in. I went to college, went to med school, live a fantastic life, have a great career, an awesome wife, and most importantly taught every one of my kids to stand up for the weak and defend the bullied. And they did just that all through school. Story 29. I haven't seen him in probably 10+ years now, but I was out at a bar with a female friend of mine. She started talking to a guy playing pool and being polite. I extended my hand and introduced myself to him and shook his hand. He smiled and said, "I know who you are," at which point it clicked who he was. Off to the side, I told my friend that he was my middle school bully, and she started to say, "He's such a sweetie. He'd give you the shirt off his back," to which I responded that he was not at all like that in middle school. Funny enough, his cousin punched me in the stomach in middle school as well. He got a week of in-school suspension, and they gave me an afternoon of detention for provoking him. He got on his motorcycle at the bar while drunk and ran into a tree and died about 12 years ago.